Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Street Fighter Podcast. My name is Justin, and joining me as always is Roddy. Keep in mind you can listen to this podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and on YouTube.
Indeed.
Yes. And today's episode, Roddy is going to be leading this one.
Yeah.
One second.
I don't know that we... What?
I feel like these microphones aren't working.
No, it's working just fine.
Okay.
Everything's good.
Sorry.
It's good.
All right, cool.
Everything's good. So not that we ever decide on, who's going to lead or whatever. Just usually have the list of questions, and this week I happen to have the list of questions.
Yeah,
I just came up with the stuff.
Yeah, I didn't write anything down.
So we're going to be talking about be talking in general about coaching in fighting games. And we're going to approach it within the different contexts where coaching appears, where it could appear, where it might appear. And don't leave us yet, because I promise it won't be that boring. It sounds boring, but coaching is this big sticking point, an elephant in the room for fighting games, where certain gamers feel that it just doesn't belong. And in fact, in the EVO rules, there is no coaching in top 8 for any event.
Yeah, in the Capcom Pro Tour rules, we did a quick look. As of 2019, there is no mention of...
As of, was it January, you said? Was it the last time they updated the rules?
Yeah, well, Capcom's rules, the last time those were updated were in January. And there was no mention of coaching really in there that I saw.
Yeah.
And then the EVO rules, like you mentioned. Nothing really in there outside of top 8.
So they do somehow, for some reason, they have a statement. I think this is in the EVO rules that says that coaching is allowed. Coaching is allowed for as long as it occurs off stage, and it lasts no longer than 30 seconds, because there can be no more than a 30-second gap between matches. But it is not allowed during top 8. So, having said that, let's rewind, and we'll talk about where coaching can occur, the different places, the different contexts in which coaching can occur. Is it a good or bad thing? What we think of it, and so I've got a few questions that I think will make us all maybe change the way the discussion happens around coaching, because I have a feeling that coaching could be pretty hype if it's approached the right way. I think it could bring new aspects to the game and make it so that this is no longer just a one-on-one match. Now it's a team sport.
Yeah,
with outside sets of eyes.
So you have bulleted points you're going to get into, right?
Just questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
so before you get into the question, I want to mention really quickly, because I've been meaning to say this for maybe a few weeks now, is that one of the reasons why I wanted to come back and reevaluate coaching as a subject is for two main reasons. One, for anyone that listens to, catches, or obviously follows the podcast in some capacity, should know, and I'll make it known now, that we intentionally try to explore subjects that the rest of the competitive scene just doesn't talk about. And on one hand, I think it's that they just don't think to talk about it, or that they just have their kind of inner circle that they kind of focus within, which is really just the CPT and EVO, just tournaments. So for other content that I listen to, Vesper, which isn't entirely all tournaments, I really try to think, like, when I was following other content, okay, what is anyone not talking about that I think would add to the conversation of Street Fighter and Street Fighter V? And so that being said, I just kind of wanted to point that out as why we kind of explore those subjects and why they're very different. So we wouldn't really talk too much about, like, tournament scene all the time. And then the other one was I actually saw it kind of like an offhanded comment, I would say, from Sajam. I think it was maybe, well, by the time you're hearing this, it would have been maybe a month ago. But he posted something on Twitter where he said, if he wasn't doing commentary, then the thing he would try to get into would be coaching. And that kind of got my mind rolling as far as, because he does the analysis videos on his channel. And it kind of got me thinking a little bit as far as, like, just that dynamic. I mean, the obvious example, the two examples that come to mind are team-based esports games, Counter-Strike, Overwatch League, that sort of thing, as well as boxing, which is where you have, like, this designated time and etiquette whereby there are two people or one team versus another, opponents, fighting each other, and then there's, like, a break where they will kind of, like, speak with their coach as far as, like, hey, you're leaving yourself open. This guy's counterattacking you too much. Like, keep your eyes up for this. Try to watch out for this. Get back in there, kid. And you go back in and you fight again. So I was kind of thinking that, coaching would be kind of the next thing that I'd like to see evolved with the tournament scene specifically. So we'll go and jump into your questions.
Okay, so let's talk about what coaching would look like at each of these different venues. Let's start with locals. We'll move on to tournaments and then pro invitationals. So those are the three contexts in which we'll kind of look at the ways, or we'll just discuss the ways that we think that coaching applies, the way it looks, the way it should possibly be, the way it can be approached. So let's first look at locals. There are the last time I was at a local, there were literally coaches everywhere. There are always eyes on your game. There are people standing over your shoulder, and if you ask somebody, hey, did you watch my match? Did you see anything that I could improve on? Because I'm at a loss. I feel like I've hit a ceiling. You know, we've all had that feeling of there's no more room here. There's something that I'm starting to bash my head against the wall. So what do I do? What do I change? Mm-hmm. And having a second head, having somebody else's eyes on your performance really can help you break through that wall, bust through that ceiling of that feeling that you can't progress. So we kind of encourage it at locals when you meet new people anywhere really who also share the same passion for fighting games. Mm-hmm. So have you ever had an experience that made you appreciate a coach at a local scene, or did you ever seek somebody out to say, hey, what do you think of this? Because I know it's not exactly universal. Like nobody is just geared to say, or not everyone is geared to say, you know, to walk up to another person, a stranger possibly, and say, what did you think of this?
I might have I will say I'm a lot worse than you as far as like the on the spot questions when I don't know what's coming. But I've never really, I feel like, and this isn't like a flex, but I feel like I've been good enough at fighting games to where like I've never had that happen where I've needed to kind of approach somebody and say, hey, what do you think? Outside of what I think is a little bit more common, which is when you lose to somebody, which is way different than a coach, right? That's just like, hey,
it's still a coaching environment,
I suppose. But what comes to mind, if I can answer that in any capacity, would be like Viet. Really,
yeah.
It was the Street Fighter 4 days when I would go and he would beat me like 3 or 4 games in a row, and I was just like, you know, I am actually good at this game and I can fight well. But I was like, well, you know, how is it that, you know, you're able to like essentially dismantle me so easily? It's like, oh, well, you do this and you do this, and when you throw fireballs full screen, you should try to do it, you know, that sort of thing. And I guess he would give me advice and tips, but maybe I'm not interpreting your question
no,
correctly.
that's fine.
But that's like my closest coaching experience, I would say.
Sure, and that's a good point, actually, you may not even realize that you are being coached or that you're asking for coaching advice. But in this case, despite the fact that you're a competent enough player, despite the fact that you are a competent enough player to not really go seek a coach, mm-hmm. there was someone who was able to read you, who was able to mm-hmm. get your goat. And so you gained knowledge and possibly closed that gap, even if it was just a little bit, because of his advice.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason that players in the West tend to see players in the East as stronger, or at least they used to. I don't know if that's still the misconception. But
No. I would say I think that probably is still happening. Sure.
Yeah. So they regularly share technology, right? Anything that they come up with, that just everybody then knows it. Everybody has it, because if the more tools you have, the better you have to be in order to elevate your own game. Mm-hmm. So and we've tried to adopt that, I feel, to some degree here, but you'll still see people online pull off some crazy setup, and somebody in the comments says, "Why didn't you save that for the tournament?" And in fact, I just saw that with this really weird colon setup that I'd never seen before. Somebody in the comments on Twitch said, "Why didn't you save that for the tournament? I'm surprised to see that pre-tournament." Like, somebody's gonna learn it and use it, and it's only gonna work for so long. Like, everybody needs all of the tools that they can possibly get. Yeah. Anyway, so back to being local. I think that it's encouraged locally. Like, even if it's not expressly pushed, we still encourage everybody who comes out to a local to talk to somebody else and say, "Hey, what are you up to?" Like, you'll just automatically kind of not necessarily make friends, but you'll at least meet people who are at your same level, who have a passion for the same thing, but because they're a different set of eyes, they allow you to raise your own game level. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to tournaments, obviously we have rules about how coaching is approached. In some cases, coaching isn't allowed As we said at the top of the show, coaching is not allowed in top 8 at EVO for any of the games. Doesn't matter which game it is. What if it was available? What if it was allowed? What if there were 30 seconds available between each of the matches? And let's say it is still 3 out of 5 because we're not changing any time here, at least in this hypothetical.
Okay.
What if coaching was allowed? What if coaching was allowed to be mic'd up so that we as the audience could listen in to that coaching session?
I was wondering if you'd remember to say that because that's what we were talking about a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Well, this was to me. This is that seed of possibility that I think could really change the way that coaching is perceived and used in fighting games. I think that we could change the way that tournaments are run solely because if we get this kind of interpersonal interaction, now we see a story developing. Now we see how what a player and his coach or her coach, what those people can come up together, what they can do together to come up with a plan. That's where I was going. That might change the game.
And elevate the level of play for sure.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, now we're introducing this gap, right? If there was already this possibility for 30 seconds between matches, but what if the coach is allowed to come up on stage and be there and sit next to their player and give them advice, not necessarily during the game, obviously, like that would be distracting for both players, but give
Smash
them
Brothers? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
See,
No,
okay,
no, I know.
we're gonna. I think what we're gonna do, we're gonna end the show with a little bit of the coaching discussion with other games, but
Okay.
we'll get to that. So we're talking Street Fighter. What if? I don't even. It doesn't matter which player it is. Player A and player B. What if player A is the player B? Well, I guess it would be Coach B and Coach A. So let's say player A is playing the game. Player A's coach, so player A's coach, we'll just call him that,
Yeah.
takes 30 seconds after the first game, after a losing match, to say their piece. If we can hear that as the audience, what does that sound like, and what does it do for the game?
I mean, well, something I mentioned a little bit earlier is it definitely will elevate the play, and I think that I'm gonna shotgun a few answers out when I say this. Something that I hear talked about on spaces like Ultra Chin is, gosh, I think I just lost my train of thought. I guess. Oh, I'm sorry. It's regarding stories. Something that if I go on a quick tangent, real quick about Evo Japan, and I found it very uninteresting to watch. I didn't tune in and the only match I watched was Punk versus Fudo.
Okay.
Just to see USA fight, and then I was out of there. But I watched the YouTube version. But I feel like the stories, and I think that the more you can tune people who aren't actually fighting into the story of what's happening, I think the more eyes it's going to draw in, the more eyes and ears, and I think that you'll get the double benefit of being able to see elevated play. Like, can you imagine? I mean, it's already cool now when someone gets like double perfected, and then you come back in there and they double perfect the person right back, right? Now, they found that answer on their own, hopefully, or this is the case. But what if you had the scenario where they were mic'd up and we could hear like, yo, dude, you gotta stop waking up with buttons. You're waking up with buttons. You're getting hit too hard, too fast. He's crush counting you at every turn. You need to keep your defense up, use your V reversals, and then they came back to the match knowing that information. You as the audience can kind of know that as well. You're kind of keen in on that knowledge, and then you can kind of get a little bit more excited. So I think that would just result in elevated play and creating better stories.
I actually, after you said part of that, it made me realize this wouldn't really be a thing that would be available. It wouldn't be an aspect available to those players who were watching the tournament in person. It would only be available to people on stream who were watching from home. It would be an added benefit to not being at the event, because then you get to hear that bit of story, unless you want to watch it after it's occurred, which isn't as interesting. Like, you want to watch the story unfold. At least I would.
It's a different experience, though. I think there's a different experience and a different expectation to that experience, because like we went to Evo a few years ago, and I remember we went to Evo. We were eating breakfast one morning with some of your buddies. And I remember I got like a text that was just like, dude, did you see that match with Arturo Sanchez versus Momochi? And I'm just like, nope. I'm eating breakfast. And I think that when you're there, even when we were in the hall, it's like we're not seeing every match. And
Yeah.
you get that benefit of having like 2 or 3 streams open depending on from home. So I think like your expectation going into an event at a tournament is
A
that
little
you're there for the
different anyway.
ambiance and the hype and like and being there in person.
Sure.
Whereas from home, you kind of, I wouldn't speak for everybody, but I think that there is a little bit of an expectation that you want as much information as possible. You also can't hear the commentators when you're at an
Well,
event.
depending.
Well, that's
sometimes
becoming
they-
more common now.
Yeah,
where-
sometimes they'll add speakers to that setup.
Yeah, it's becoming more common now that like during top 8 or grand finals, like the commentators are right there in the crowd. But there's points where you would just watch a tournament, and you're there in person. You're not really hearing the commentator.
So let's say that coaching is allowed even in top 8, and let's continue the hypothetical and say that coaches and their players are mic'd, or at least there's a microphone available so that we can hear their conversation. On either side, it really doesn't matter. Is the hype elevated or broken because of that? Is it just changed completely? Because that's the point here, right? We want to be excited about the stories that players are experiencing as that happens, as they unfold.
Can I? If I wanted, I just want to jump in. Are you done? Or
Yeah.
okay, I didn't know if you had anything else.
Extrapolating on the question.
In 2000, this is a while ago. It was 2014, I guess, or maybe 15. It was one of the last tournaments for Street Fighter 4.
Okay.
And when we were in, I think it was you. Were we both there?
Yeah.
Okay, we were both there, and they were because I think they showed Nikali during that stream for Street Fighter 5. I think that's when they unveiled him.
I think so.
But the
I
point
think I
is
remember
that something happened in that main hall where everyone was, where you couldn't hear the commentary. Something happened, and we all, or at least some of us, left, and we went into because you had to have like a specific pass to be in the room where like the big hall was. But if you didn't have that pass and you'd be in
that's
another room with
right.
the commentary,
Yeah.
there was a few of us that opted to leave that main hall just so we could hear the commentary. And I think it was because I think it was the situation was it was Momochi and Infiltration, and something happened with the controllers,
Oh yeah.
the arcade sticks.
That's right.
And it was like no one knew what was going on, and we couldn't hear anything. So I think that was when we were just like, okay, let's just get in the other room. Like maybe they know something else. And so we went in the other room, and then you hear, I think it was James Chen and Seth Killian. We're like, yeah, there's a bit of an issue with the controller. And then once we were already in there, we're like, oh, we might as well stay. So we stayed in there, and then it was like, oh, look at this uppercut, FADC, axe kick. It's just like, oh, yeah, like just having that more information, I think, would elevate. So I think it does hype it up a little bit more, but probably more so from home or a place where expecting to listen to the commentary on stream is expected.
I think that the folks, those of us who enjoy commentary, would probably start to weigh whether or not we wanted to both hear the commentary and the coaches, and we might make a decision on whether or not we're going to a tournament based on that information. Like if we decide, you know what, I really just like hearing Say Jam. I like hearing his commentary, and you know what, I also like listening to. Let's pick a random player.
K-Brad.
K-Brad. That's really weird. I was thinking that.
You said random. I was just like, I don't know. Let's pick him.
K-Brad's pretty random.
Yeah.
So, and I like hearing K-Brad as a coach. Like, say he was, for instance.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just stay home this time and watch the whole thing on multi streams. Like I'll just do.
Yeah, I mean, another bit of a side tangent, something that we've explored on this podcast before is, when we were talking about tournament entry numbers going lower, but there was an emphasis more on people kind of looking into stream numbers. Are they getting higher? Capcom eventually went to like Facebook and YouTube to live stream their tournaments, and I guess maybe I think they're a little. It would do more for audiences at home if you just want to listen to that kind of stuff. So.
Makes me wonder if there's a way that you could accommodate those folks who also wanted to listen to commentary in the venue without interrupting the players and the coaches. Other than like providing internet so that everybody could stream on their phone and have like a headphone in.
Well, that's kind of curious. Like, I guess one thing we could talk about, I don't know if this is one of your questions, but one thing we can kind of explore is what that would look like at an event. Because what I'm picturing, and not that it has to be this way, but the one that I'm kind of picturing is you have the two players that are sitting at most of the time their monitors are away from each other. Sometimes they're sitting and their monitors are right next to each other, but what's starting to look a little bit more common is they're sitting away from each other, right? And so
kind of at an angle so that the rest of the audience can see the backs of the players, possibly like a bit of a profile, and the screen.
Yeah. And so what I kind of picture the etiquette looking like is, and I know I confused you with this a couple weeks ago when I was trying to describe this, so hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
If I sound confusing.
I remember this.
But the idea is most of the matches are broken into the first to win 2 games. Can we say that?
Yes.
Okay. So each match between 2 players, like you and me, we would have the first person to win 2 games moves on. So the idea is if I win the first game against you, right, and then at that point, the coach could call for something that kind of sounds, or for the sake of my example, is like a timeout almost, where both players were to get up and they would kind of walk away.
Go to their corners.
Go to their corners, yeah. They would walk away, they would go to their corners, and then that's where like the coaches would be mic'd. And they would be mic'd, and the players would come up, and then that's when that like 1 to 2 minutes, if it's even that long, 30 seconds, whatever, that's when that conversation would take place. So you'd have camera people on them, on both players. You'd have the mic on the coach, and obviously the player wouldn't have a mic, but the coach would only have a mic.
I think you could work all this with just a boom mic. I think that
Okay. Yeah,
if
you could.
if you're gonna have a camera crew on the coach, you're gonna have a boom mic there as
Yeah.
well.
So that conversation takes place, and then the players, after that bell is rung, they come back to their seats and they play another game. And in the example I came up with earlier, if I were to win that second game, then I win the match and I move on.
Right.
Right? If you were to win the game, right?
have
So
another
now we're
opportunity-
1-1.
we have
then
another opportunity for coaching.
You can do it again.
Okay, so what should the rules be to regulate this? Because it can't just be 30 seconds, a minute. Like, there's no good one size fits all. But we need to keep stuff moving. We need to keep the flow of the matches going. Usually, it's you just jump right back in. Now we're possibly breaking after every win-loss scenario.
Well, it would have been useful if I had made notes on this, for one. I guess on the spot, obviously would only really be for stream. That's one thing to keep in mind. You couldn't really do that for all the stream setups. Or I'm sorry, all the setups, where everybody has to report to their kiosk
Sure,
almost.
sure.
You couldn't do that then. So you literally wouldn't allow it to be there, but it would be a rule that could possibly...
You could do like a little punch clock type thing like they do in chess.
Have you been to a tournament?
I have. I know it's ramshackle and there's already a ton of equipment.
We're already
and you're shoulder
crammed
to
together.
shoulder to shoulder with everybody.
I don't know if it really works as much there. It's more or less an idea that I think would work kind of primarily on stream, which
Sure.
allows it to have a different, because they already have their own workflow. I'm sure that, I don't know if you have or have seen what it looks like to fight on stream, but a lot of times they say, okay, you guys will be playing on stream, go report over there.
Yeah,
And
I've played on stream.
And you go over there and then you kind of wait for your turn and they go, okay, you two, you're up. So they already have kind of their well-oiled machine as far as how this is going to look. Hey, you sit here, you sit there, you're on station A, you're on station B, sign into this account. I feel like, and then just add to that. Not that it's easy to do this, but you could add to that and be like, okay, now you guys understand. I know it sounds like boxing, but it's you guys understand that depending on who wins, you have a 1-minute session with your coach. Your coach is going to be standing in your respective corners. You guys understand that? Yes. Okay, cool. Go ahead and sign in. Pick your characters. And it's I just feel like it would just go that way. You only have a 1 minute. There'd be somebody there with the coach that has the stop clock, and then once it's ready to go, okay, that's 1 minute. Players have to return to their stations. You go back and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's kind of off the top of my head. I really didn't kind of formulate any sort of how it would look for the entire tournament. It would, in my head, it would be something that kind of exists kind of on stream. Because that's also what the commentators are watching, too. They're not watching the stations.
Sure.
They're watching only the ones that are on stream.
Right. Do you think can you foresee any other, difficulty that arises from having coaches available to each player? I was trying to think of something that other than interrupting the flow of each game, of each set, would cause someone to tune out, would cause a viewer or anybody who's watching to either leave the venue or to watch another stream.
See...
Maybe they don't like the coach. Maybe they don't like the player.
Oh, dude, I think people are going to love it. You think
but
the
I think
FGC
that-
eats this stuff up, man? The
Yeah,
drama?
that's true. That's true. I know the drama.
LTG is coaching somebody. You don't think anybody's going to want to tune into that?
Oh,
think
why'd you
about
mention
it.
him?
Think about it. I'm just saying. Think about it. Chris T's coaching somebody, you'd be like, ooh, baby. Let's see what happens. Let's see if this. I mean, but that one's more of a positive one. But I'm just saying, sometimes you could see those scenarios where the one thing we haven't really kind of explored is signing up with a coach too. That's
Oh man, what does the pay scale for coaches look like?
Yeah, we'll
Do you keep them on staff? Does Echo Fox have a group of coaches? How do you train coaches for Street Fighter? How do you train coaches for all fighting games?
Well, we're gonna
Oh.
let me shift right quick. We're gonna no, let's finish up this because I do want to get to that.
Okay.
Let's as far as any other complications. I mean, like I said, it would need to take place on stream if it was going to happen at all. I think that one complication is that things would probably run behind. That's the first thing that comes to mind is
That's
running
possible.
behind. But in when we had an kind of off camera discussion about it, what I kind of mentioned was I wanted to see top 8 not be 3 out of 5, and then
to
instead
go back to 2 out of 3.
instead go back to 2 out of 3 because
allow the coaching
you know
sessions.
because and then that way that would give you time for all the stuff that happens before it. Now, granted, for what it's worth, 3 out of 5 is usually on Sunday, but if you were going to have coaches, you couldn't do as it is right now with all these fighting games happening at one event. You couldn't have coaching implemented in any capacity for top 8 and have 3 out of 5. It just you couldn't do it.
You're right. No, I think you're correct. And in fact, the thing that I kind of just came to the realization of is, and I've already said it once, usually players go immediately back into a match. And now we are deliberately breaking up. We're creating this divide between matches if there's a coaching session. How much do we change the shift in momentum from match to match?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. As you were saying it, it just kind of hit me because if you had like the Sonic Fox situation with Goichi for Dragon Ball,
Where he wanted to switch sides?
yeah, you might as well just
Yeah.
substitute that out with a coach because that was like.
But if it's consistent?
Goichi was pounding on him,
Yes, he
and,
was.
and that's what we call icing, right? But essentially, if an Akali player, it could be anybody versus an Bison player, and he just rolls him over, double perfect. It's normally the expectation that the player is going to go to the character selection and they're going to be like, "The hell happened?" and just kind of think about it and be like, "Okay, I need a second." But it's also I need a second, figure out what went wrong, and then also a little bit of icing. It's like a little bit of like, let me stop this person in their tracks a little bit. If there was coaching and it was allowed and it was part of the tournament scene, then having somebody, it would change the way that you would even approach fighting people. You know, in general, because if you ran over somebody one game, you'd have this expectation that they would.
They're absolutely gonna stop for
gonna
coaching.
Yeah, they're definitely going to go talk to their coach.
Yeah.
And you would need to. But I mean, the other player would get the opportunity too. So it could very well be you go talk to the coach and it's like, keep up what you're doing, kid. You were beating him. You were mauling him. You know, get in there. Or it could just be like, you know, you get back in there and like now you're reset and so you're fighting differently and things like that. So, I don't know. That would disrupt the flow, for sure. Especially for a game like Street Fighter. I mean, it's not going to happen for Street Fighter 5. We're kind of talking coaching in Street Fighter, coaching in fighting games. But if the game is more offense oriented, it like even anime fighters are, it can really look weird because you have all this action, and then you see these people and they stop and they go talk to somebody.
See, that's why I think it'd be a huge mistake not to take advantage of coaching of coaches and miking them up if they're there. Like if they're allowed, you've got to be on them with a camera and something that allows the audience to listen into that conversation, because now not only are you as a viewer, you're getting kind of a free lesson in how to think about Street Fighter because you're assuming that you're watching a coach or a set of players or a set of coaches because you like them and you like the way that they coach, you like the way that those players play. So now you're starting to follow. You're generating this fan base of, it's not just this one exceptional player who does amazing things on the stick or on the pad. Now you're following these people's stories.
Yeah.
So I think that positive outweighs the negative of we're changing the dynamic of each match.
Well, let me go back to my notes here because you said something in there. I want to get back to the salaries and like how we would incorporate these people here soon.
I wasn't even intending to talk about that, but
well, I do.
It just popped up.
I do because we briefly mentioned something about that and like evolving the scene off camera.
Sure.
But
yeah.
something I wanted to come back to here with regards to even just locals and tournaments is that there is a common dislike, and I wrote this down while you were talking. There's a common dislike for coaching at tournaments, and a big reason that you wouldn't have to look very far to get to is that people don't like that you're not fighting on your own merit. You know, and it's something that you see that is like the number one thing is like somebody getting coached is like, no, you got to be able to figure it out on your own. Now, I come from the perspective, and I will mention this many times, I think I have on the podcast, that I definitely like change in anything. So if someone's perspective is, well, that's not the way it was, cool, that's the way it was. I'd like to see anything, whether it's fighting games, Street Fighter, or whatever I'm doing in my life. I want to see things change and evolve. And so, go ahead.
So in that line of thought, is coaching or any change really? Let's go with coaching specifically. Is coaching something that fighting gamers in general need to embrace in order to make fighting games as esports grow?
I think it would help. I don't think there's really any detriment. I think the only real downside that I can see from coaching as it gets refined, whether it's the format we've come up with now or anything else, the only real downside I can see is that people, and there's a lot of them, that don't like coaching would just they would fight it. They would go against it.
How do we address that? So you've got this cadre of players that just aren't going to accept that coaching has become a thing. If it does, how do you address their misgivings about this new institution?
Well, there's a couple different ways, I feel. One is we talk about it sometimes when businesses just up and change something. Is one, you just come out with this change and you roll with the negativity that comes your way because it's going to happen. Like Street Fighter League. Street Fighter League came out. It's having this U.S. only, and the way that they're going through with it, they didn't back down because people didn't like it. They're like, listen, we have to try it because who knows? Maybe in a year or two, that's like another alternate tournament standard.
Yep.
We've talked about how I think it was UFGT, Ultimate Fighting Game Tournament, originally with Keats, and then it went over to the Hado, what is the tournament called? Combo Breaker, where they started doing the 24-hour venues.
Oh, right.
Then DreamHack Austin kind of had, not then as in next, but at some point later, DreamHack Austin had a 24-hour
there is no more DreamHack
gaming,
Austin.
yeah, but a 24-hour gaming place where people can train and fight each other in fighting games and all the other games too. But I mean, 6 years ago that wasn't a thing, and now we have something like CEO, which is taking place, well, in Daytona as opposed to Orlando, I believe. But
I don't know where CEO is. That's what you're talking about, right?
Florida, yeah.
I know it's in Florida. I just don't know which
they
city
have
it's in.
and they have the wrestling component there, and then it's got a convention portion.
See, I really think you bring in wrestling, you bring in boxing. Those things have story.
What?
They have story attached to
Yeah.
them just inherently. I really think that there is more of a story to be had here by involving coaching, by getting it,
But I think
by integrating it into the experience.
as far as not necessarily to say naysayers, but as far as people who would be apprehensive to oh, I don't know if I want to do this, it's I mean it for me, what's enough is just saying hey, we have to try something new, because if we just keep doing the same things year after year, then the scene you're looking to grow isn't going to grow, because it's just going to be the same people getting older. You have to bring in something different that is going to attract new people, or even, as we talked about earlier, attract people who, like ourselves, who maybe know about it and just aren't going, or know about it and then don't watch the streams. If you change things and it's oh, this is different, So as far as people that are naysayers, people who wouldn't want to do it, the best thing I could really try to say would be, be open-minded to change, and to the people who can institute the change, like the tournament organizers, try something new.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, once again, you are an old school Street Fighter player, and it's been years since you've been to a tournament.
Ah.
What if you've been watching streams with coaches who've been coaching their players? So you've been getting into a particular series of coaches. Let's say they're all from Echo Fox, just for the sake of argument. So there's a small team of 3 coaches from Echo Fox who travel with their players to different venues and coach them, and they've been doing really well. So you've been following this team of coaches. What if there is a booth at your favorite tournament that's local, or that's regional rather, not local, that has an Echo Fox group of trainers, coaches there for you to go experience what it's like to be part of that scene?
Yeah.
Would you be more encouraged to go? Just because that thing exists. If it's a thing you're into, you've been following their story, you really like the way the Echo Fox coaches do their magic. Well, I would be encouraged to go. I would want to go do that. I want to go sit down with them and have a 5-minute session.
Pick their brain, yeah.
Yeah. Well, even just have them watch you fight against somebody. And then like each person, they have their own coach. They get a 1-minute coaching session for free just because they showed up to the venue. And now you've got a positive story for the player. You've got a positive story on the side of the coaches, for the sponsor as well, who sponsored that spot at the tournament, at the regional. And now you're more invested in Echo Fox. Now you've got something to attach yourself to as far as stardom and fandom goes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think that there are so many excellently marketable points, and I recognize that this is solely so that companies can make money. Like it's
Yeah.
to involve player base, yes, but they're going to make more money because this thing brings engagement.
I keep looking at the timer because I'm wondering when I'm going to say something that's going to be super drama filled. But what I will say is that obviously I was mentioning a little bit earlier that you have to change and evolve things. It can't just be the same stuff over and over and over because it's going to get dull.
I think there's an argument to be made against that you can stick with what works, but right now we haven't found that thing. So we have to keep changing.
Well, I was going to mention that I feel like some of the older players or veteran players that have been around a long time in the Street Fighter scene or the fighting game scene, you don't have to play the game. And some of them don't. Some of them don't. A lot of them don't. I don't necessarily know if people like, David Graham or James Chen are really playing, but you don't necessarily have to play the game. And I think that their platform in a way is that they have this storied history of being involved in the fighting game community. So here's their wisdom or here's their knowledge that they can pass to people who are getting into it now, right? But there's a lot of people, and when I say older veteran players, I don't necessarily mean age. I mean like even people who like Smug. Like Smug is a really good player, still a young guy, but and maybe he wants to play Street Fighter. Maybe that's his future. That's what he wants to do. But what I'm saying is, as far as like the coaches go, he could just be a coach. He's clearly got the he has, and he is a particular kind of player too. And there's a lot of other people like this, but he's the kind of player where he can do well now. So I feel like him as a coach, it kind of draws that attention. It kind of draws people to him even more because it's like, well, we already know this guy can play, but now he's going to teach somebody else to play. Think about what we kind of heard and saw with the, it wasn't the, I don't remember the Japanese name for it, but it wasn't like the Kumite. It was that event that Daigo fought Tokido in. You remember that? The first
Which
to 10?
one?
The first to 10? Where
I think I remember what you're talking about. I don't remember the name of it.
yeah. Well,
It's not Topanga League, is it?
No. I have the name in my head. I just don't want to do any disrespect by saying the wrong thing.
Okay.
But anyway, Tokido fought Daigo. Daigo ended up winning, I think, maybe 10-6 or 10-2. Might have been how that worked. It was Gao versus Akuma. And in that event, I was thinking, we obviously one of the takeaway stories of that match was that Daigo found someone that he trained to be a really good Akuma player so that he can fight Tokido, right? That's a form of coaching. I mean, that's more of
it was Kimono Michi.
Okay, thank you. But that's a form. I mean, that's more like training, but that's a form of coaching as well. It's like you take somebody who is already doing well, and you pretty much teach them everything that they can so they can become a stronger player. Mm-hmm. We see. This. I'm sure this happens in the U.S. I'm just thinking of the Japanese examples right now, but Momochi and Chocoblanca's. I can't pronounce the Japanese names, but they're like academy or their training program that they have where they would sponsor players to go.
I don't know what it's called. I don't think I ever knew what it was called.
Shinobi.
Oh, Shinobism?
Yeah, okay.
I thought that was just the name of their channel, their Twitch channel.
Oh, well, I don't know. But essentially, I thought that they were.
I don't know.
Yeah, double check me on that. But, we already have an element of it. It's just, like I said, going back a point earlier, is that you have people who. And I get it. Like, I don't want to try to get in with people and say, like, I come from the old fighting game scene too. But, if somebody was. I do. But if someone, was getting coached right next to me, and then we fought again and they won, I'd be like, you feel a little bitter about it. You're just like, man, you wouldn't have been able to beat me if they didn't tell you such and such. But that's a very old school mentality of looking at things. And it's also a very naive way of looking at things too. Of like you wouldn't have beat me if, So it's like.
Yeah, you can't change the rules to make it suit your game.
Yeah, because, and for what it's worth, the idea that person kind of had that in them the whole time is almost cooler to me. You know, like it's like you're fighting somebody and then they start getting coaching, or somebody says, hey, you know, keep in mind these things, and then they rise to the occasion and then can beat other people. It's like, wow, because it's not like the person coaching them is playing on their behalf, you know, and that's kind of something that we see a little bit, you know, with people like with Sajam, you know, where he does this match analysis. He would make a great coach.
Yeah, he's not the only one who does that. Automatic does them as well. There's another.
Well, Automatic is also like a really good player.
He is a very good player. Yeah,
Like-
that's absolutely something that seems to go hand in hand. Like, although if you have the analytical mind to pick apart frame by frame what's going on during a match, then it seems like that kind of skill set behooves you to becoming a coach. But you could also become a fantastic player if you really wanted to. But if that's just not your thing and you like analyzing the game instead, you're still going to be an effective coach, if not one of the better coaches, because you can pick apart the game in real time or after the fact. Like, I think that there's a lot of room for coaching style to elevate the level of playership and viewership, as well as the level of gameplay that we see. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you were looking at this vast and varied field of players who will become coaches, theoretically, that will give us this new narrative of fighting games.
Yeah, and it's
actually pretty exciting to think about it, and I hope that it happens.
It's very exciting to think about, and like I said, it's what kind of irks me sometimes is when because I do see it quite frequently, is just that idea that like, no, it has to be the way it's always been. You know, I mean, it's very personal, but I've never held that philosophy in my life on anything except for this podcast, which is more or less the same. But I mean, there's some differences. Even like if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a difference in like the way it looks. You know,
versus the way we sound.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but for just the sake of changing, I mean, we're going to change the podcast too.
Sure.
Depending on how long we keep doing this, like even if you look at like episode 1 to like now, right? Like it's different, you know, and you keep evolving. I mean, we have discussions like that. We have discussions like that all the time where like right after the cameras stop, essentially, or the camera, or even before, we'll like talk about stuff and we're thinking like, you know, like one of the reasons why this is on a different channel for a YouTube channel is because one of the things that I thought might help, and maybe it doesn't work, maybe it does, but one of the things I wanted to do to kind of evolve the Street Fighter podcast and evolve the Street Fighter focused discussion was to give it its own place that wasn't surrounding anything else that had to do with the stuff that I like live stream or any other essays that I do on my own personal YouTube channel. I wanted to have its own space where people could go. And that's, to me, a level of evolving it. And so I think that constantly changing, looking for things you can do differently, not even really just for the point of success. Like, yeah, I would like the podcast to do better. But at the same time, it also just feels good to try something new and explore, you know, the unknown a little bit.
Yeah.
So
you moved, like, if it wasn't already working, you need to move to something new.
Yeah.
To hopefully evolve it and make it work.
And in coaching, like I said, I think, and I'd love to, if people, you know, made this far in the podcast, or if they're
well done.
Yeah, if they're listening and watching, or you know, they have thoughts on coaching, you know, I'm not saying that there's any particular points that are invalid. I mean, I think the common opinion, to be honest, is that no coaching.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think you could listen to this whole conversation, and then at the end of it, just be like, okay, no coaching. I think you're going to still get a lot of that. We're just here to kind of
present the view.
Yeah, present the view and point out exactly what we think might be something that we could see being awesome for the tournament scene, the fighting game scene, moving forward. Just something that is no different in change than moving out of the arcades.
And something that we didn't actually get to talk about, which we kind of covered it, I feel like, anyway, despite having not mentioned it explicitly, were the invitational tournaments. So this is just pros, right? Do they still have coaches? Yeah, probably. It's probably going to be very similar to what you'd see at a tournament otherwise, at any other tournament. I don't really foresee anything different about that venue versus your regular regional or national tournament. At least not as far as coaching is concerned. Maybe you could give a little bit more leeway. Maybe there's another minute between matches or something like that. Maybe there's a team-based coaching session because it's something like Street Fighter League, which is, I don't know, 3v3 or whatever.
I mean, one thing that would be kind of neat too is I don't know really what happens when Capcom Pro Tour, those invitationals go to those breaks, but that'd be an interesting point to, put those conversations.
Sure.
I
think
mean,
you should still mic those conversations up and have them recorded so that you could play them like inset into the match while it's going on. So you hear that little blurb of like, you need to make sure you're not waking up with buttons because he's, crush countering you on wake up pretty much 90% of the time. And it's your fault. Like that's the thing you're doing. So you got to be aware of that. Like you hear that over the next round or two, and then you see that change take place.
Or not change.
Or not change, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe your
They
opponent
keep doing
adapts
the same
to it.
stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as like the drama that people love to attach themselves to, not even just in the fighting game scene, but just that idea that like your coach told you this, man, and you still did it anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, something.
Interviewing the coach, interviewing the player, having them pair up for an interview. I mean, you've got so much more story to generate here. I really think that it holds nothing but positive benefits as far as moving fighting games forward into a more highlighted esports spot. Like
Yeah.
I think you generate more viewers based on gaining more story because as humans we're kind of pre-programmed to listen to stories. That's what we find interesting.
Something I think you kind of touched on a little bit earlier. One of my last points. Do you have any other questions, by the way?
No, I just have a final thought that I'm going to leave everybody with.
Okay. I guess my final thought is, I do like the idea, we talked about it, a couple weeks ago, of what coaching could do as far as like giving people another place in the scene. Like I feel like it's like you have like these pocketed, tournament organizers, like an Alex Jabali, right? You have like tournament organizer. Then you have like podcaster, like maybe we are or Ultra Chin is. And then you have like the players. And something that came up in the Smash Brothers scene, I think a while ago, was like, what do people do? Like, what if you, not necessarily too old, but what if you, if you're not a player, you might feel like, well, what else can I really contribute? There's a lot of different things you contribute: art, cosplay, music, remixes, that kind of thing. But sometimes people, if they are players and they don't feel like they want to stay attached to fighting, they want to stay attached to the tournaments and the going out and meeting people part, but maybe you aren't doing as well in results. Well, maybe you can be a coach or a trainer, and it's, pushing people, having them do like the equivalent of like sets.
Reps.
It's like, drop and give me 50 combos, you could have these elements where it gives people an avenue to do something else. And then like you were saying earlier, seeing that dynamic between two people, where it's like, I'm going to say this one, and then I'll kind of leave it here. And I really thought that this was fascinating when there was a little bit of drama happening years ago with Infiltration and Laugh. I don't know if you remember this, but there was drama happening.
Yeah.
It was drama happening because Infiltration comes out of nowhere, and he's doing really well, and Laugh and him are buddies. And then when Laugh's and Infiltration had some sort of falling out, Infiltration wasn't doing so hot. And there was this kind of like rumor happening. It's like, oh, was Laugh literally the person being like, hey, dude, don't do wake up uppercut in this situation, Akuma? It's... But I mean, Infiltration ended up standing on his own 2 feet later. But there was that small rumor that happened because it was like Laugh was the person with the notes. Laugh was the person that would like sit next to him during Street Fighter Cross Tekken and be like, "Hey, look out for this." But that was just the final thing I wanted to say is that I think that even if you're not a player or if you want to transition from something that isn't a player, if the fighting game tournament scene is able to accommodate coaching or wants to explore it in some capacity, then you essentially have something that players can do that isn't just playing the game, which we've obviously seen as being a huge hustle. Like, I have to do well so I can get sponsored. What if you were the person that was behind this person doing well? Like, what if this person came out of nowhere, the next Smug, the next K-Brad, the next whatever, and, like, I mean, imagine if Daigo was, like, just stop playing. I mean, he should keep playing because he's incredibly good. But what if he stopped playing? He just trained Otani, and Otani was the new Daigo. And then it became this, like, oh, crap, no wonder he's so good. He's got one of the best coaches of all time.
There is something going on in Japan I think it's right now, where they have top players that picked out, like, rookie players and
It's the Street Fighter League.
Oh, is that SFL?
Yeah, it's just different in Japan.
Oh,
It has
okay.
different rules.
That's okay. Right, it
than
is
the US.
SFL. It's just different than what's happening here.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my final thought. Is that you can do more.
Okay,
than just play.
and I'm gonna leave everybody with a question. So feel free to comment on anything else that we talked about in the episode. However, do you feel that other fighting games, other games in general that are competitive, require different styles of coaching, and what would they look like? Like, what would it look like for Smash? What would it look like for Tekken? do they differ from Street Fighter in any form or fashion? Outside of the obvious technical details. Like footsies is obviously not the same for Guilty Gear as it is for Street Fighter.
Yeah, we know there's differences between genres, right?
Yeah.
Like shooters versus like fighting game. Listen, man, that guy's -13 on block. I'm using an assault rifle. You're like, like it doesn't
what?
it doesn't correlate. But
You
yeah,
got to switch to your secondary weapon. But this
Yeah.
is Street Fighter.
I'd be curious to know how that would look for. I mean, I would say curious. I mean, I don't want the podcast to go on too much longer. We're about 52 minutes. But
yeah, I think we're done.
yeah, but I have an idea of how I think it would look in other tournaments. But I'd like to know what other people think as far as other fighting games for sure.
All right.
All right, cool.
Well, I think that's it for this episode.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
We'll catch you later.